Evening, everyone, or morning, I guess I should say. It's morning for you guys. I don't know why I said.
Morning, yeah.
Good morning, everybody.
Hey. Hey, welcome, Fieldy. Awesome. So, should we get started? Graham, you have the first item.
Yeah, so the only, so got nothing really to demo today, and I realized I didn't just put this on the agenda. I will do another announcement about this in Slack, but just a very small note, people to be aware, we now have no external syncing as part of the GitLab com pipeline. So like the k8s workloads GitLab com repo, we don't sync from Chef anymore for everything. We do have another repo that synchronizes secrets into Kubernetes secrets from Chef still, but I would suspect with the Vault, the secrets management work that reliability is doing, that seems to be progressing. I would suspect that in the future at some point, all of that will be handled by that project, and that whole thing will go away, and just Chef itself, the Chef secret stuff will just go away in general. So it isn't, so yeah, it's just something to be aware of. I have noticed, at least in APAC hours, because it's when ops.gitlab.net goes down for its upgrade, that we have had a lot more stability in the CI pipelines for GitLab com, especially during auto deploys. However, we haven't had the best amount of stability for auto deploys for other reasons, so it's kind of been lost a little bit. But you know, that part I do feel a lot more confident now. It's a little bit quicker, and yeah, it's a lot more safer. So when you do see, if you're a release manager, you do see failures in the GitLab com part of auto deploys, it's just another thing you can rule out. It's not going to be Chef or any external sources. It's more likely a real failure of something.
So just so I understand this, Graham,
Sure.
the first part of what you said, where we don't have any external dependencies, you're talking about the k8s workloads GitLab com pipeline no longer is reaching out to, I guess before it was doing HTTP fetches
on
for
ops. Yeah, to
on
ops. Yeah, to get the roles.
Yeah. And it was also doing calls to GKMS to, so
Yep.
all that. Yep. Basically that values from external sources.
Yes, that file's
YAML,
gone.
that file is gone. So we've, just so I'm clear,
Yeah, sure.
we've duplicated all of that configuration in YAML files in k8s workloads GitLab com. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So everything that was on GitLab com, in the GitLab com repo, there was that GitLab secrets Helm file. That's basically just been copied into the GitLab secrets Git repo. Does that make sense?
So yeah, I understand the secrets part, but there was this other part, which was just like, not secrets, but just like stuff we were parsing out of JSON files.
Yeah, gotcha.
What about that stuff?
Yeah, so that good point. So there's a little bit of I think over the few months we kind of whittled that down. So there was stuff that we got the upstream chart to, like, you need to put this is secrets, so please support doing this in secrets. And the other pieces, so basically what they've added, so a lot of them were environment variable stuff, and technically they were like, we consider them secrets, but it's arguably they're not secrets, or for other people they might be secrets. So the classic example is rack attack. So the upstream chart now has support for you to just generically say, because there's Kubernetes generic support for this, if there's a Kubernetes secret object, you can take the value from that and set it as an environment variable for the container. So when you do the env, instead of just key value, it's env secret source key, secret key name, or something like that. I can't remember it off the top of my head. So yes. So the key here is, and I should announce this as well and make it clear, we do not have support now. Well, it's not that we don't have support. We would like people, if there's anything that needs to be a secret at all, it is a Kubernetes secret, even if before we had to have it as an environment variable, or like even a value that had to be pulled in at like a Helm, some of them were actual chart values and stuff. Most of that is gone. And we want to try and move forward with the idea of, if we can ever consider something secret, we're not just going to fall back to putting it in Chef and like pulling it from Chef as just like well, we can do that, so we should. We want to really treat it as like, this needs to be a secret object as a first class citizen. I haven't done this part yet, but the next step will be to take away the k8s workloads users to not have permissions to view, create, update, or do anything with secrets. And then once we do that, that paves the way for us making those pipelines public and improving the user experience for people who aren't SREs and want to roll out changes, because they can see the pipelines, they can see the diffs.
I see.
Because they'll be safe, because they can't see secrets. It'll be impossible.
Right.
Hopefully.
That makes, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I still am unclear about my question, which was, are we still depending on these JSON? Like we had regular config, not secret config, but regular config
that
was being pulled out of the JSON file. So we removed all that.
Yeah. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. I think I get it now. Yeah. So anything that was just regular. So probably a good one is like Giddily nodes, right? Like that
was one of them.
So no, we require now for you to quote unquote manually sync that. And the reason.
Go ahead.
The reasoning was even with the setup we had, you had to open an MR anyway and just like create a fake text file or something to trigger it.
Yeah.
So it just like, we may as well just get you to just do the change manually. And I, spoke to a few people who are making a lot of those types of changes, and they were kind of okay with it. And now that the only thing that's actually left on VMs is database and Giddily, it's pretty much the first place you go and change something like that is probably k8s workloads anyway.
I guess my only concern here is that, we still have omnibus VMs, the deployer node specifically, I guess. And I guess there should have.
We would like to remove.
Yeah, we want to get rid of that.
Yeah, of course. But for now, I just want to make sure that SREs are aware that if they, well, let's take an example. I don't know. Let's say we add a new storage shard, since that's a pretty common thing. I guess for now, I would add that to both Chef and k8s workloads as 2 MRs, right?
Yeah.
Whereas before it was 1 MR, and then you had to re-trigger the k8s workloads.
Well, it was kind of 2 MRs anyway, right? You would still do an MR to k8s workloads, yeah.
Of course,
Honestly, part of this may actually be that we may have hit the tipping point where we need to clean out the Chef config, because we put stuff in Chef now. I don't even think we need to put in Chef anymore. I don't even know if half of what we've configured in Chef is even relevant now that only Giddily and Postgres are using it.
No, deployer.
Like deployer, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, this is the, and hopefully that's a near-term thing that we're gonna get rid of. But once that goes away, then I think it's time to clean up, because you're right, then we're just left with basically just Giddily at that point, and Redis uses the omnibus, but and that configuration is pretty isolated, I think. Like there isn't there's a whole lot we can clean up then. Okay, I'm just kind of wondering whether we're going to make the mistake of not. I don't know how to avoid, like, we could add a danger bot warning or something to Chef repo to say like, hey, I see that you're changing the JSON file, and maybe you need to do this in k8s workloads as well. But and I think that answers that question. The second question I have is, so with regard to secrets, you said that we've moved everything to this new project, and we're still sourcing secrets from GKMS, right? But for new secrets, you're saying you don't want to do that.
No, sorry. So for new secrets, that's fine. Like, I think what I wanted to avoid is in the GitLab com repo. So in the GitLab secrets repo, we can do whatever we want. I don't really mind. In the GitLab com repo, we had certain things that were Helm values. So rack attack is a good one. But we put it in GKMS because it was secret, and we just relied on the fact that at execution time it would pull from GKMS. But it wasn't like, you know what I mean?
It wasn't a Kubernetes secret. It wasn't a Kubernetes
secret. But what all I'm just trying to say is, and I'm trying to work with kind of upstream as well, the chart team on this as well, is that if something could ever be considered a secret, like if this could conceivably be secret data, the first thing you do is make sure we can read it from a secret. Because if, let's say we didn't have GKMS and we were just putting all the values in that Git repo, we just couldn't put some of the stuff in there. So, and even if the chart doesn't support it, I guess my other thing I was kind of saying is we have enough leverage where we can still put it as a secret and work around that to pull it in. We can modify the init container. We've got enough kind of, I wouldn't say hacks, but we have enough knowledge and workaround. But yeah, the goal is just try and get everything in the secrets, and then we'll figure out from there how we can consume that.
So if I have a new secret, I kind of do the same thing I was doing before, which is add it to GKMS and update the secrets chart in this new project.
Yeah.
One more question. We've had the problem before where I need to change a secret and the secret's updated, but nothing, like the application doesn't know.
Yep.
Right.
So
what's the run book? What's the run book for that? Did it change at all, or I guess it's the same? You just retrigger a deployment, or like what is the standard way to adjust that?
So to expand upon that, so I don't think enough people know about this as well, is the way we actually create those secrets. We use a Kubernetes interface that is create only. So what I say is, so if you go into GKMS, you change a secret, you go into the GitLab secrets repo and just run a pipeline again, you would expect it to resync it and that existing secret to change. It actually won't at the moment. The Helm diff and everything will say there is no changes. And that's because we use the string data interface on the secret object instead of the base64 encoded data interface. So we use a specific interface that only works when you create a secret, and you cannot update secrets through that. So what you're supposed to do if you're changing a secret, I know you talked about adding a secret, but either way, is you have to create a new secret with a new version number. So it could be like whatever, V2, or if it's a new secret, V1. And then in the GitLab Helm chart, wherever it's being consumed, you reference that name, or you reference that new version, or whatever.
Yeah, and I think this is in the README of the new project, right?
Yeah, I think I remember it is. Yeah, this. I'm hoping that as the secrets management project takes off, they're going to be using an external secrets controller, and this will it won't just be like this. It'll just be they'll just have a process. We just create these CRD objects that would just sync it, and it'll just all happen.
Okay, so I need to change a secret. I have to create a new secret, and then I need
just copy paste. Yeah.
Yeah, so then how many, there's two MRs then, right? One in the secrets project to update the name of the secret, and then that I run that first.
Yeah, so I would.
And now and the old secret's still there, right? So you have two secrets now, two different versions of the same secret, I guess. And then I run another pipeline in k8s workloads GitLab com, which updates the name of the secret, and that will trigger deployment, and it'll update everything.
And you will have to open that MR with the I'm changing it to like a V1 to a V2 or whatever, right? Like there's no automatic. And I think that's kind of a little bit better because you can do them in two deliberate steps, right? So what I've been doing changing secrets recently is I do a V2 of the secret. I roll that out. I manually go in and check the new contents, look how I would expect. Then I do my MR in the GitLab com repo, and I change the version number to like version 2. I roll that out, and then I go back and do an MR to clean up the old secret, if I want. And it is a lot of MRs. It is a little bit of overhead, but it is that if you never need to roll back, the old secret's still there. You're not stuck in this it's syncing the new secret from Chef. I need to go back into Chef and sync. It just, it's that constant, you make the deliberate change everywhere, and the old secret's still there, so you can still roll back in GitLab com if needed.
Yeah, maybe we should expand on the README. I don't know where to put this. I think the README might be the best place to kind of give you the full picture of what to do when a secret changes. Because I didn't even think of the cleanup, but yeah, I guess that has to be done as well, or it has to be done at some point.
I mean, it's nice. It's not mandatory, but yeah, it's one of those things. I will admit I'm kind of kicking this can down the road a little bit because I'm hoping this secrets management project will make it better.
Sure.
But I don't know how long that's going to be. I shouldn't rely on that. That's probably bad form.
Yeah, it's a good
Cool.
point. Graham, do you want to take that as an action?
Sure, I will.
check you
I
have all
will
the
just
stuff
expand that
documented?
up, and
Okay,
I can
thanks.
fling that through to Jarv to just make sure that, from your perspective, especially from reliability's perspective, they understand the pieces.
Another thing that would be nice to standardize is I have a secret that I need to. There have been secrets that like are needed for Kubernetes that aren't present yet in Omnibus, and I think what I've done in the past is like I've done like underscore secret name in the GKMS because it's kind of weird, right? Because like, yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if we could standardize that a bit better, because normally the GKMS structure, that JSON structure matches the Omnibus config structure, right? Like
I think it's actual chef role objects, right? Like they're full chef role objects, and we're kind of stuffing extra fields in them, I think. Because I think I've done the same thing. Or maybe
yeah,
not.
yeah. It's a mapping of the GitLab RB, right? Like it's the same structure as the GitLab RB.
I thought it was more.
So
I thought it was literally a whole chef role, but I haven't looked at it in so long. I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's like node properties for, or not the role properties for the Omnibus GitLab cookbook, right? So anyway, yeah, we've had this weird situation where we have secrets for Kubernetes that don't exist in Chef,
and then we just aren't needed, put them in there anyway.
Yeah, we put them in there anyway, you know. So I don't know, man. Like I guess I'm in the same camp of hoping this gets a lot better, but it's kind of the Wild West, right? When it comes to stuff, you know. Yeah.
I completely agree. And most of the secrets, the new ones, are all ones that unfortunately are not. And you know, we could Tanker does its secrets management in repo as well through CI. So that's like another kind of fragmentation we have there. So yeah, it's not it is not great at the moment, I will admit.
Are we like pretty much like don't have any external dependencies now in our pipelines? Like I guess in the ideal situation, we could even block outgoing requests except to the Kubernetes cluster to see like if we depend on anything outside of where the pipeline is run.
Yeah, so I had a look at this the other day because I was interested with the Bitnami issue we had last week.
Yeah.
And so when I've looked at other companies in the past as well, all their build systems were completely off the internet. Like they were isolated. You have to have everything in a local location, everything. And I do think it's a nice goal to have as a larger goal. I was looking to see if there was some way we could actually do it at the runner level, and that's where I kind of got distracted and lost. But I overall, I agree. I've got that hack at the moment to try and manually block sites in the CI job, but it's really error prone. I would love us to have a new set of runners, preferably even not managed by us, right? Like by the runner team or whatever, that we could use that don't have internet access. And then we could just start using tagging jobs with that and start testing the idea of completely offline processes or things like that. Both for k8s workloads and maybe to expand that to other things. I do think there's merit in that. Short answer is I agree. I think we really need to start getting a little bit stricter about our external dependencies.
Yeah. I think it's worth like, I don't know, I think we have an issue for this to ensure that, but the problem is that we use the runner manager and
I'm sure there's a few different things where it's not a simple just block everything, right? Like absolutely, but we do need to try and pull that down a little bit where we can, I think. Like even just a runner manager, probably the Kubernetes clusters. It would be great. What I would love is if in the GitLab CI you could say like there would be a firewall stanza or something, and you could just put like what it gets translated to like a Docker network policy or something. That would be fantastic if the runner could do that.
Are we using the runner manager with generated VMs or with Kubernetes?
VMs.
VMs. Yeah.
So we can
for a while
run this. We can create a network in the VM providers that has no internet access. And so when
we can just do a private network without a NAT. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Interesting.
But we would have to reconfigure things a bit, but we could definitely do that. Yeah.
We do have a long-standing epic open for basically making, like, it's something like, yeah, making deployments not depend on GitLab.com, and you know, I set up some monitoring around that already, and yeah, I can see, like, we pull in release manager YAMLs from GitLab.com. There's a few different pieces, just not across k8s workloads, but across release tools. None of it is unsolvable, but it is interesting when you actually look at it from a bigger perspective, what the dependencies are.
Yeah, I was fighting with this as release manager recently, because even though we put a lot of effort in making our own stuff, say offline or independent from things like baking dependencies in images and things like that, development is not doing this. So so best case, we can deploy something that already exists.
Yes.
Because if we need to package something, there's no way we are going to make this.
Yeah.
QA download stuff from Ruby gems, and there are other dependencies that are just, maybe they are in the cache, but who knows?
But that's why we need to, like, I think if we had runners, like if we just had, like, here's the runners with this tag, and then we can just start, like, that's when you start the process. And I'm gonna try and use the runner, because people won't actually know. I mean, it's kind of a condition of software in general now, right? Like, you don't know until you try it, and then you like figure out like what's actually happening.
Okay, I'll bring this up with the runner team to see. I think what we'd have to do is create a new runner manager and associate it with a network. I don't know how this would work with the Kubernetes endpoints. I mean, is that that should be all in the internal network or not?
It should be, right? I think all of them got internal IPs. If you want my longer term solution to that, we could be using k8s and Agent K, and then it's got a built-in CI tunnel, in which case it all goes through that. And that also could be an idea, but we're not ready for that yet. But yeah, I think we can. Our Kubernetes clusters should be able to be accessed by internal networks. I don't see why they're not.
Cool.
Does someone want to get an issue up and detailed with that stuff?
I'll take an action for that. I can kick off that conversation.
Great, let's shove. So in the interest of time, can we move on to the pipeline isolation stuff? Because I think that might be fairly involved as well. So Gabe, do you want to give us a bit of a walkthrough of this epic? You're muted if you're speaking, Graham.
Okay, I don't know why keyboard shortcuts for Zoom decided to not work. Okay. So I'm going to highlight the discussion issue on this. So the epic itself is based off the discussion we've had previously about some of the problems and pain points we have with the GitLab com repository, in particular now focusing on the CI jobs and the CI setup in specifically. The epic is like trying to make sure that we can make the pipelines as safe, as quick, and as discreet as possible. And this issue is a discussion and kind of, I guess, an investigation into what we have so far. So when we look at GitLab com repo specifically, it's interesting in that there are actually 3 different types of pipelines that we actually run in that. 4 if you actually count the scheduled pipelines that do chart bumps, but they're so small and isolated. They're so different. I'm just going to exclude them from this discussion for the moment. So we actually have auto deploy pipelines that are triggered by the main auto deploy pipeline. I've called them repo change pipelines, but they're just when someone wants to change some part of the configuration inside that environment. So typically a Helm value or something like that. And then we have the MR-diff pipelines, which are typically for those repo change requests, but they're just diff pipelines for merge requests. So the big part of this as well, at the moment, all of these pipelines to some degree can overlap. They can interleave a little bit, and this leads to lots of interesting things. It can lead to auto deploy applying changes that it's not meant to, although we stop that by having tooling in place to try and prevent that. It can lead to diff pipelines displaying information from other change requests or unapplied changes depending on when it's run. and more problems like that. So trying to understand what we can do to improve this. And really what we need to do is isolation. We need more pipelines to be isolated. We don't want them to interleave. So when we see pipelines running or things happening, we get an accurate understanding of what's going on at that point in time. So I'll bump text up for people. So yeah, so at the moment we actually do locking in that repository, but it's only at the environment level for each individual job. So for example, if you have a diff job and then an apply job straight after, you have another pipeline, say an auto deploy pipeline that's just doing an apply, it is possible for those to interleave between the diff and the apply, which should be almost an atomic operation. An auto deploy pipeline could come through, or the opposite way around, right? Auto deploy is going along, does its diff and apply. Auto deploy theoretically can say, I'm doing a diff, this diff looks clean, there's no outstanding changes, and then someone else's change request pipeline can sneak through because it's just the level of locking we have and things like that. So yeah, so this is kind of what I'm covering here. The following scenarios can happen. An auto deploy to an environment and a configuration change to another environment can take place very close together, seconds apart. Oh, and this is another thing that I didn't realize until recently. So we do QA obviously as part of the main auto deploy pipeline, but when you just do a normal change request in the GitLab com repo, we also try and do QA there as well because, you know, safety and so on. Apparently QA told me that we can't or should not have multiple QA pipelines running against the same environment. And we do see problems with this where we get errors like things already taken, like, project group already taken, things like that. So that's one kind of problem, is that we can have QAs caused by like different pipelines running at the same environment, giving inaccurate test results. Obviously, it'd be nice if that's not the case, but that is the case. So we need to accommodate that. An auto deploy to an environment and a configuration change to an environment can each run a QA pipeline that can clash. Yep. Configuration change to all environments gets held up by a deploy to staging, which means the configuration change gets delayed going to production. So if I want to change, say, a container memory limit in production, because our GitLab com pipeline is so unintelligent, it has to do a job on every single environment. We just do everything. It just basically applies everything. I'm just going to apply to every environment. So if an auto deploy is going to staging at that point, it can't get the lock for staging. And therefore my change, which I only want to affect production, gets held up by something which is happening in a different environment. Excuse me. A diff job on an MR shows incorrect information because of scenario 3. So yeah, so we also had these diff pipelines interleaving, and they show outstanding changes from unapplied changes. So we want to lock over that. Initially, so I'll talk through this in a little bit more, but I am going to go a little bit off script for the epic. Initially, I was kind of like, we should just lock the whole repo. So if you ever do anything in GitLab com, only one pipeline can run at a time. But after thinking about that more, that would actually cause probably a lot of problems and a lot of slowdown. It does mean that, like, if you're applying a change to staging, you cannot do an auto deploy to production, which would be, or pre, like if you're applying a change to pre, you can't do auto deploy to production. So it's probably not ideal. So, an entire pipeline lock, as much as it would make our lives a lot easier and simpler to understand, is probably untenable for us. So the next level is pipeline locking per environment, which as I said, is what we kind of already do, but it's actually expanding that for the whole pipeline. So if a pipeline is targeting an environment, we lock that environment for that pipeline. It does also mean that we need to refactor and make our GitLab com pipelines more intelligent. And part of the work I have been doing by removing external sources, changing around parts of that repo, is so that we can start leveraging the GitLab CI functionality based on files changed, right? So if you change the staging file, we will apply a change to stage, we'll have the jobs for staging. There's some exceptions like the root values file and things like that, but we can try and make that more intelligent. We could look at things like dynamic child pipelines, where we run a diff against every environment. And if the diff against an environment reports empty, then we just do not have the job for that environment. We do not lock, we do not do an apply for that environment, which would also be an improvement to what we have now. So I think we have a lot of options for doing this. It's just really picking the right one and the right implementation. So that's kind of what I've come out to, is we probably want to lock per environment, and we want to make our pipelines more sensible so that our pipelines are only doing the jobs that make sense.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So let me start with QA first. So do we have evidences of a failure by, so let's say we change configurations, because we are talking about changing configurations here, because we run QA in the repo only for configuration changes.
Yeah.
So do we have evidences of failure or incident caused by something like this that could not be detected by regular metrics instead of running QA? Because I see no value in running QA in this situation. It takes hours, it's flaky, and we're not testing new code, we are changing a configuration. So I think we are looking at massive scale error rates if something like this breaks, because you are breaking connection to database, you are just misconfiguring something that should have big errors. So yeah.
So for that question, I've definitely been saved by it. Like I've definitely been like, okay, I've applied to change the staging, then staging QA has failed, and I've been like, oh, that was not great. Probably the biggest problem we have, unfortunately, is we don't page on staging errors, and our staging metrics and alerts in general are not, they're not as good as they should be. But you are absolutely right. Ideally, and to be clear, that's not even for staging to a degree, right? Like any environment, we should just have metrics. Yeah, we should have good metrics, good alerting, so that you do something, there's a problem, you detect that straight away. The other thing that QA is kind of good in this context is that immediate feedback that I do appreciate people want, is that, did my thing work or not? So an SRE from reliability or anywhere comes, they make a change, QA is run, it validates the environment's still working, the pipeline is green, therefore I'm done and I can go away. Whereas I don't have to like find the metrics, or I have to jump into the metrics channel and see if anything alerted for what, 5-10 minutes.
I'm thinking about integrating metrics checks in the pipeline.
Oh yes, no, I
you
agree.
Delay 10 minutes and then you have a script that is checking for things like this. Or
so
even
I think
more.
Yeah.
We can even have some kind of, this is even better. So when you change something, you may consider providing some way a custom metrics to check, so that when you want to change something as part of your merge request, there is a place, there is something where you say, I want to monitor this. Look at this before, do the change, wait 10 minutes, whatever, 15, look again. And if there are significant changes, fail the pipeline.
Yep. So I'm just going to quickly jump to this epic, which is the one we're planning on doing after this. This is, I'm keen basically for that 100%. So the pipeline will have a test stage where we validate, and any other static analysis, apply, and then monitor the rollout of any change resources. So this is a high level epic, and basically I agree. At the moment, we've got two things that determine if a change was successful. If Helm says it's successfully applied, and I don't like the way Helm validates it, it's very anemic, it's not that great. It's okay, but it's not great. And B, we do QA. But we can replace those. But we need probably a custom tool. No, not a custom tool, but we need to define better tooling for both generating the manifest, applying the manifest, and most importantly, monitoring them out. As you said, you want to probably have something where you define the service, you define some clear Prometheus metrics, like an AppDex or something that indicate whether that service is healthy or not, and you want to monitor those. You probably want to monitor the pods. You probably want to monitor deployment. You probably want to monitor a bunch of Kubernetes stuff. There's there's other Kubernetes things we may want to monitor, like custom resources and things like that. But we also need to define application level metrics for that health.
Yeah, sure.
So I think I am 100% agreeing with you. We need to actually do that to replace QA. I don't think what we have is with Helm and QA, I just don't think is getting us where we need to be.
Okay, cool.
But that I kind of consider that a little bit out of scope for at least just the pipeline work.
Yeah, let's plan that as a future iteration. I think it's a just for the clarity of this recording as well. We're saying this is for config changes, right?
Yeah,
that we would.
Changes.
Yes.
Yeah. That's
why
I was saying if we're going to invest time in making the QA integration with the config changes better, while we want indeed to have a monitoring solution, I would say
absolutely
let's keep as is and focus on what we want to have instead of working on improving that one.
Yep.
Okay, so we are all in agreement here. Thank you
for
your answer.
So I think
second question.
Sure.
Yeah, do you want to?
No, you that's fine.
So the second question is about the locking itself. So I do think that, so your reasoning is good. Environment locking, I think is the way to go. I do agree with dynamic child pipelines so that we can actually, because we need to validate this because I think we never tested. But the problem is that our CI is designed to lock by job and we want to lock by pipeline. So I think that the only way for doing this is by dynamic child pipeline so that we can lock at the trigger level. So the trigger level, which is dependent, will have the lock. And so we hope that because this is running while the child pipeline is running, this will help the lock. But I don't think this is enough because as soon as the child pipeline fail, the lock is released.
It's released, yeah.
And so this is not good. And,
well,
but this brings me to another point, which is if we are going toward running migrations in Kubernetes, I'm expecting to have another trigger before the effective deployment that will just run migrations. And I would like to have this in lock as well. So I think we should spend time in investigating distributed lock across pipelines, which is not part of the product. And that's the problem. But I mean, we already have locking happening at, what is it? Is in Chef, right? Because we do this from deployer and we did this from release tools, but the storage of the lock state is Chef itself. So I don't really like that one, but it could be okay. The point is that it looks like that we are going toward more something that is re-entrant lock with multiple pipelines and condition variables. When you have the system, the environment is locked because a process is running. And then you may have sub-processes running in that locked system where may be waiting for different conditions to happen, which is basically how you do concurrencies in a complex system. But then here we also have the addition that this is also distributed, so it's more challenging.
Yep. So I agree. I've been trying to not get too deep into implementation so far, but I'm 100% in agreement with you. So I've also come to the conclusion that we need to define a locking mechanism, and it's not just relying on GitLab for a specific pipeline. I would almost say it could be time to unify the Chef locking we have with the k8s workloads locking. So I'm looking at, say, the deployments and environments API for GitLab on ops.gitlab.net is like a central locking manager, but it could be anything. The implementation is kind of just an implementation detail. What is interesting to me, and I discovered or thought about this more this week, and it's not really captured here as much. So here I just kind of like talk about how long some of these pipelines take and like how long different pipelines are locked. But on top of auto deploy pipelines, on top of like changes to GitLab.com pipelines, we have another type of locking that we do entirely via people, and that's change request pipelines. So at the moment for me in APAC hours, I've been losing a lot of time in my day because of the CI/CD composition project. To be clear, it's a very valid project, super important. I fully support all the work they're doing, but it's interesting because you can see in the channel, in the delivery channel, we rely on human locking. We're sitting around trying to like coordinate with each other, like very frantic on trying to understand who's deploying where or what's going on. What we would really like to do, I think, as maybe a stretch kind of implementation detail for this project, is not only just have, okay, auto deploys can lock the pipe, like lock an environment, k8s workloads can lock an environment. We may even want to see if like engineers doing change requests actually have to fetch like a ChatOps command or a tool or something, fetch and control and lock the environment themselves for the change requests they are doing. Because of two reasons. One, right, if they get that change lock and we have our pipeline set up correctly, we're sure we don't even have to do anything, right? We know the pipelines will just not back up or block until the pipeline's released. It does encourage people to be more diligent about their locking and unlocking, which I don't think is a bad thing, because we do rely on people at the moment, and people, we forget and do things. The second part, I think it's really good for us to do it this way as well, is I want to capture metrics on these locks to understand the contention we have in environments. So for example, I have a suspicion that with the new pipeline setup, with all the change request work and stuff's going on, that the staging environment is locked or in use 80% of the day, 70% of the day. But if we have like a locking mechanism that everyone is using, we can actually track that in metrics, right? Like I think, Alessio, we could use delivery metrics tool to like pull the lock state out from GitLab or something. And then we could get metrics on that, and we could show that, oh, look at the staging environment, or look at the production environment. 80% of the day it's locked for changes for whatever reason. And maybe they're this change, maybe they're k8s workloads pipelines, maybe they're change requests or whatever. But we really need to understand that, because at the moment it feels like everyone is getting frustrated, understandably. But there's no real way for us to detail how much of this contention is happening. So I think not only do we want to do this locking work for safety, we need to do it for observability to show that, like, auto deploy is a good one as well. So with the new auto deploy pipeline, we lock staging for long, because we lock it for the whole deployment cycle of production now. So we deploy staging, we deploy production, we QA staging, we post-deploy migration staging, then we unlock.
That will change very soon though, Graham. So I think, although that's true for now, we should just
I agree.
Say for now that yes, that's the case, and hope the post-deploy migrations work lands before we even get to this point. So I think for now, yes, like let's lock for the times that we're running the current pipeline. So we're currently running staging deploy, then we wait, then post-deploy migrations, and then test. But that won't be the case for too much longer.
No, I agree. And I guess my point there wasn't even, I understand why we're doing it and we're definitely changing it, but I never really thought about that and had no way of really visualizing that.
Exactly.
Like, we never really think about it.
More in terms of we probably, like, we don't need to necessarily try to accommodate for that, I guess is the thing. It's certainly true, and I don't think very many people would realize that's how it is set up. If you're not watching the announcements channel, you wouldn't even know that, you wouldn't see that. So for now, I think we have to just accept that staging and production would both be locked in parallel.
And that's fine, but once again, that I think we want people to see that clear. I mean, like, talking away, even our GitLab com pipeline, which we've already mentioned a few times tonight, is not efficiently set up. If we want to lock the environment from when it does a dry run to when it doesn't apply, production can be locked for up to 95 minutes with our current setup if we don't change anything, because we would lock here to do the dry run, we'd upgrade everything else, then we upgrade production at the end, including running QA on staging. So that's like 95 minutes we could conceivably lock production for if we want to lock over these two jobs. So we can see that the job setup is inefficient. So in terms of this epic, at the moment, it's still just discussion. It's just capturing this, and I'm trying to put together, I guess, a solution. What is this going to look like? What do we want? It sounds like, if I'm understanding people correctly, we're kind of all in agreement that we want a general locking mechanism that both the auto deploy pipeline and k8s workloads GitLab com repo need to interface with. Both of them needs to be the same lock. It sounds like we probably, at least for the moment, we need to lock over both applying a change, and if a QA needs to run for that environment, we should probably lock on that as well, so we don't have multiple QAs confusing things. And I think the other part,
just one thing related to that bit, Graham. It would be great to get that, make sure that's written down somewhere. I'd like to see something from quality that actually says that has to be the case, because in the future, that will be a really good thing for us to be able to work with them on, in terms of like, how does that not need to be the case? Once we know how many sort of we would like to be running in parallel, I think we can work with quality to improve that. So let's make sure we get quality to actually write down why that is the case right now.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's the first time I'm hearing this, Graham. Like I'm really surprised, but also not surprised, I guess. But I thought this was possible before.
It's one of those things where, as I said, the errors I saw, and we're like, yeah, you know, we can understand in certain parts of certain jobs, run in certain times.
Okay.
It's probably more of a case of, like, before we had QA in Kate's workload, so before we even put it in there, right? Probably the only people running QA jobs was auto deploy, right? And it was already in auto deploy had good enough locking that there was never any contention.
Yeah.
So we probably didn't run them frequently enough. I think this is a scaling thing.
There's QA schedule, and I agree. Like, this is like, we looked at this, and this is like, this is not great. We can see situations where QA tests could clash, but you're right. This is not an unsolvable problem. If they actually, if we defined this is what we need, or they had it's
probably just test data,
the motivation,
right? Like, to set up already.
Yeah,
so,
gotcha.
Yeah.
And in which case, sorry.
Go ahead, finish what you're saying.
All I was just going to say is, in which case, if we do get confirmation one way or another, if they're like, yes, we can fix this, and they do fix it, then we can like change the scope of this project. We can say we only need to lock for deploys, we don't need to lock for QA. Although, once again, I still kind of feel like if you make a change, you only want that QA running. Otherwise, you QA against multiple changes. I don't know.
Assume for now it'll be like this. Quality are not going to be able to fix this quickly. So just for now, Graham, to keep this epic simple, assume that yes, you will have your change and your testing would be locked together.
So that kind of brings me to 3I on the agenda. I just was wondering, like, does it make the most sense if most of our issues are about QA and changes being deployed while QA is running? Maybe just the QA job should be the holder of the lock for the environment. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. That's certainly one implementation consideration we could do. The only thing is we don't have QA for some environments like production, which I guess is fine, you know, if we don't have QA.
Oh, we do, don't we?
No, I don't think so. Someone correct me if I'm wrong.
Only for Canary? I thought we had it for both.
Configuration changes or deployment?
Well, say auto deploy. I don't think we do QA in
auto deploy is not running QA in production.
Okay.
And the GitLab com library is only running for staging. It's not running for staging Canary, and it's not running for production Canary. So that's also another gap we have.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, whatever. If we manage to sort that out, I was thinking like maybe QA should be that holder of the lock, like right before QA runs, it just locks everything, including itself. And then releases that lock.
But then the question
that's
is
just one idea.
The question is, how do you know if you can deploy? Because you are not deploying from QA. So the holder is the most external entity, not the inner one. That's why you want
I guess
lock, because you want to be able to reinforce the lock from something that is a child of the owner of the lock itself.
I was thinking that the trigger job would create the lock, right, and release it.
So you're still saying deploy and QA happen under the one lock. That's, I guess, is the key. Like deploy.
Yes. Like there'd be one lock that would lock all. Basically, the lock would be for the QA job itself and all of the things that the QA job is testing. All of the.
But what
jobs,
about the deploy
right?
part? Because you want to keep the lock for both, right? Like, I guess that's the key is if you have one lock for deploy and one lock for QA, or you don't lock on deploy, that means multiple changes can come through, unless I'm misunderstanding.
Yeah, I would lock for deploy as well. Like it would be one lock that would lock the all the jobs that make changes on the things that we are testing, and then release it at the end.
QA from running on schedule.
Sounds like we're in agreement. Lock at the beginning, change, test, unlock.
Yeah. And just as, and Jay is just like, I'm just wondering if we introduce more locking, we're going to start stacking up pipelines, waiting for locks. And this is super scary to me. Like when that lock gets released, then it's a race to see who can grab it the first. And that might not be like, so would we have to, we would need extra logic there to like,
leave it. What I'm hoping, and this could be completely a bad assumption, is looking at the GitLab deployments API and environments API, which I was thinking we would use to implement this. It has the concept of like the person who gets the lock next, or I think it is, the person who gets the lock next is the next numbered pipeline. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but you're right. We should do this. Like if changes are going to back up, they need to happen in order. Ideally, we would do something like a merge train. And I looked into that as well. But the problem we have is a merge train setup would happen on .com, but ops has no concept of the merge request. It just gets git commits on branches. So it just can't do a merge train unless we wanted to switch everyone to doing merge requests on ops, which I assume we don't want to do.
So, yeah, I don't know. And like, do you really want to like run each change in QA? You want to run QA on every, if you have 10 changes in like, yeah, of course you want smaller changes, right? But at the same time, like we could be backed up forever. So
we can start doing, I want to do more intelligent stuff. Like you can put labels on issues for like skip QA and stuff like at the moment. We don't have good ways of controlling the pipeline, but we should be able to be like, this change, we could skip QA or something. I agree.
Health checks. Let's simplify later by just giving a standard pipeline that hasn't got an hour of QA on it, but we've got good monitoring and health checks, and we get staging, so we can optimize that way.
I agree, but we're not going to be there at the moment. But I think that's the key.
For now, though, I think Graham, I think Graham's point earlier kind of answers this, Jeff, which is yes, that's possibly true. But actually, if we can start to see how much time we're locking the environments for, then we can. Because I don't think we're too far away from scaling the infrastructure department to the point where we are all trying to make too many changes, and then we'll maybe need to review different categories of changes or find some way where it's not like an exclusive lock over an environment.
And I'm just going to say one more point, which is also going to, this is obviously months away or if even longer, but it becomes interesting too, because if we want to start making service ownership done by the teams, then a global lock may not be good, right? You might want to lock per service as well.
I was also thinking when you mentioned the idea of the merge train, which is obviously not applicable because what you said, if we are willing to say take the risk of batching changes together, because we need to double check the details of what we support, but we can say that job is locked, so you can run only one, and that also is superseded by more recent version of the same one. What I think it happens right now, which I don't like, is that if a new one gets in, the current running get canceled. I would like to have something like the current one continues, all in between get canceled, and only the most recent one runs in line, right? So if we have something like this, we could say something like, detect, as you say, detect changes per environment. And so you identify that we are changing production. So you do dynamic child pipeline, which is dependent, which is locked by the resource, and is marked as a deployment to an environment that only relies on the most recent versions, which means first one gets in, we get a pipeline and is running. Then we merge 3 changes. So this is the first one is running, then we have 3 changes. When this kicks in and this is still running, these 2 get canceled because the only one is this one, which means it will accumulate changes. but it gives us the sequence, right? So you can run only one at a time, and it's kind of the opposite of the merge train, because the merge train run all of them, and the first to fail removes everything on top. But if you have to run 1 hour QA in everyone, it means you never deploy. This goes in the opposite direction, which say, let's accumulate. So if we have a peak time, we accumulate all the changes together and we run the most recent.
The other option is
then we have to figure out why. But
yeah, maybe if we're going to do that, we just okay, we're not going to do QA as part of GitLab com change pipelines, but we just do them regularly once every 2 hours. I think the problem was we had them there because people were rolling out changes and they would break staging and we weren't watching or monitoring it. And then, staging would broke and then we'd come along to do an auto deploy and the environment was broken. And then it was figured out it was a Kubernetes change hours ago. But maybe there's a middle ground where we don't QA for every single change, but we do more regular QA than what we did before, which was no changes, kind of thing. I don't know.
Could be worth looking at the data. Maybe let's figure out how much, if we were to say something like that and say we didn't if we'd rolled out changes every 2 hours, how many changes might that be? And that might help us figure out what a good cadence is.
That's actually a really good point. If I was to look at the data on how many merge requests and stuff we do a day for GitLab com, it's not a massive amount. It varies day to day, but it's not a huge amount. So maybe it's not. But as you said, as we scale infrastructure, that's going to change. But
yeah, well, we can fix some of that stuff in the future, I think. So just as we are getting to the end now, we're really close to, we're kind of officially over time, but very, very close to kind of top of the hour as well. Graham, what do you want from us? What will help us move this discussion forwards?
So I think everything we've talked about tonight has been good. I think the next step for me probably is to actually define a proposal and probably get feedback on that. The discussion has been there, and really I was just the discussion issue itself was to get out, did I miss anything? And I think talking to everyone here even tonight, I don't think we've missed anything big. I mean, we've thought about a few new options. And yeah, just kind of explaining the problem, getting feedback and seeing if there's anything I haven't considered or thought. The next stage is to really just distill it into some proposal. And then I think probably a next round of feedback. And I think that'll obviously be a much more targeted discussion about what are the actual problems with this proposal what do we see that we have to do.
Awesome. Sounds good. Great. Thanks so much, Graham. I appreciate how much effort you've put into thinking through this stuff and getting us to a point where we actually have a single issue with this stuff really clearly captured, because I know it's not at all straightforward to pull all these threads together. So thanks for putting all that work in. Great. And thanks for the chats, everyone. Great discussion today. And yeah, let's follow up on the issues. Awesome.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, staying around late as well.
Take care. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.